Welcome to the Walled Garden Podcast. Here we nourish the gardens of our minds, one meaningful conversation at a time. If you'd like to find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. Thanks for joining us. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Walled Garden Podcast. So, I was taking a look today at the upcoming episodes that we have, our guests still to be released. The audio is there in the waiting room. And man, we've got some really exciting conversations coming up. I'm really looking forward to having you all listen to those and there's a general feeling of excitement within me and other people who I'm working with at the moment, just around the vision and the mission of the Walled Garden and what we're looking to achieve. And so I'll say to all of you, not only for the interviews that we've got coming up, but also just for what we've got planned for the Walled Garden. There's a lot of excitement there, and I hope that you guys are paying attention, and we will update you as we move along. But nonetheless, I'm equally excited to present this conversation to you today that I had with none other than Shane Trotter. Now, Shane is a person who was introduced to me by Brandon Tumblin of the Strong Stoic podcast. Please head over there and have a listen to that show. Brandon is a very wise individual, and as you'll see probably shortly, we'll be working more together in the Walled Garden. But nonetheless, Brandon said to me, "You've got to get this guy Shane Trotter on. He's an incredible individual, really putting some great stuff out into the world, and I think you guys would have a great conversation." And that's exactly what happened. And so I don't want to spend too much time in this preamble because I do give Shane a bit of an introduction when we get into the conversation. But I'm just going to read you a little bit more about Shane before we dive in, and then we'll go straight into the conversation. So Shane Trotter is the author of Setting the Bar, Preparing Our Kids to Thrive in an Era of Distraction, Dependency, and Entitlement. As a writer, educator, and high school strength and conditioning coordinator, he's been challenging youth development norms for over a decade. Shane believes that too much emphasis on comfort and lost sense of community standards has left people feeling purposeless, disconnected, and trapped in self-limiting patterns. Shane has been featured by multiple coaching clinics and Spartan.com. His articles have been published by websites with millions of readers, such as Quillette, Aereo, and Breaking Muscle, where he was an expert coach in residence and helped start the Breaking Muscle podcast. His blog, Inspired Human Development, focuses on exploring the principles of human thriving, and you can subscribe to get his newsletter, Stuff That They Never Told You, for free each week. So with all that said, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Thank you so much to Brandon, again, from the Strong Stoic podcast. Give it a listen. And I'm going to present you now to Shane Trotter in conversation. I've gotten to know Brandon over these past few weeks a lot more, and after our last conversation, Brandon said, "I've just had this guy, Shane Trotter, on my show. You have to get him on." And when I get to know a person like Brandon, I take those recommendations very seriously because Brandon's a great guy. He's clearly aiming up, and that's a good thing. And so when he says you should talk to this person, likely the person who he talked to is somebody who is also aiming up. So Shane Trotter, you've got a book. Setting the Bar, Preparing Our Kids to Thrive in an Era of Distraction, Dependency, and Entitlement. I actually just want to quickly read your one-liner on your website because I think it's a great place to start, and then maybe I'll share the topic of this discussion and we'll just dive in. So you say you're a father, husband, writer, educator, co-founder of Inspired Human Development, believer in barbarian virtues, seeker of truth, arate, and the principles of human thriving. And as it relates to our conversation today, you thought that it would be a good direction to go to talk about how we can pull ourselves back from this devolution that we see in our society at the moment. So I guess the first thing that I want to ask you, Shane, and Brandon, please at any point in this conversation, just jump in, man. The first thing that I'll ask you is just, okay, so the claim is human devolution. That's what's happening right now. So I guess I'll start by asking, okay, well, what are the signs that you see? How do we know that that's happening? And then perhaps, once we've decided upon the problem, we can see what wisdom you have to offer that can pull us back from that and move us in a better direction. So Shane, if you just want to introduce yourself a little bit better than what I did, and then I'll throw that question at you.
All right. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, that's a wonderful introduction. So I'm Shane Trotter. I'm a 33-year-old strength and conditioning coordinator, educator. So a lot of my experience and perspective comes from being around students and being working at a high school. And so certainly if you're looking at humanity and just the human experience, there are a lot of ways that today's world is the most charmed existence that you could ever live. I'm also a history major. It wasn't very long ago when it was fairly common for women to die in childbirth. I mean, this is within the last 150 years. So there are many, many phenomenal innovations that we are the beneficiaries of every single day. But if you're just looking at the quality of the human, so the quality of each human person in the aggregate, I think it's undeniably going down. I think we're seeing less activated, less engaged, less skillful, all the way around human beings. That we're hyper distracted. We're not driven by any clear purpose, or we're less likely to be driven by clear purpose. And it's easy to point to things. We have more edified social views. It's easy to point to things like, well, we have better views regarding gay marriage, or whether race relations, whatever these things are. So we must be better than ever. But a lot of those things, I like to think of them, they are the consequence of growing up in the modern world, of being raised in this world. They didn't require anything from us but a like button, right? So they don't require us to do anything other than agree with the consensus of the time. So we have not achieved anything from them. If you look at the sort of virtues that require a lot of work, things like wisdom, courage, perseverance, fortitude, ability to be tough when you need to be tough, not just for machismo reasons, but to actually weather life's challenges. All these different things. I put it in my book. Who's more likely to replace the toilet paper roll? We are less, in my opinion, broadly less activated, less engaged, and moving towards becoming a lesser species. So I think of the Wall-E trajectory. I think the reason we can remember back the movie Wall-E, and there's that very famous scene where you're seeing these deformed, morbidly obese people projected across via technology, and it strikes at something we all kind of feel, that this is where the arc of humanity is heading. So I think we need social mechanisms that pull us back from that. I think we've always had those mechanisms, but those are devolving as well. So one of those being religion, but just culture in general is been handed over to my mind, to marketers, and so we're not doing a very good job fighting back.
Oh, that's such an interesting idea that our culture is kind of being handed over to marketers, right? And this is you mentioned religion there. I want to ask you something, because it seems to me that one of the core tenets of a lot of world religions is face new technology and innovations with a certain amount of caution, because they may be the thing that eventually turns around and destroys you. And how much of what we see happening right now do you think we can pull back to something like even just the invention of the internet, that explosion of new technological innovation? Is when you say marketers and stuff like that, I mean, like, something that I've thought for a while is it's horrifying to think that the most brilliant minds of our times, in whether it's like philosophy, in that philosophical field, or even psychology, they're going into these giant tech platforms and they're getting paid to sit there and think about how we can get you and I to spend 10 more seconds on this app every day, and then 10 more seconds and then 10 more seconds. And I often just wonder, like, what is the effect of taking those, of setting up our institutions where, like you say, marketing is kind of over the top there. It's like, how can we train more and more people to get into the field of data analytics and marketing so that we can get more people to buy these products and stuff? So my question is, again, going back to it, could you talk to us about this? I'm not sure how much time you've spent with this idea, but this idea, being cautious of the new innovations that eventually, like, will turn around and bite us. And how do you think we see that a lot today?
Well, certainly you use the example of the internet. I think if you look at Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, he has this brilliant concept of social capital, which is basically the extent to which we trust each other, trust each institutions, and we cooperate and are connected to people around us. And as a social species, higher social capital tends to lead to human flourishing. So social capital has gone down considerably and consistently since the 1950s. And he points to four key reasons, but the chief reason he says that is far more a cause than anything else is the television, the over-reliance of Americans on television for entertainment. And so, you see, this is the beginning of devolution. This is the beginning of higher rates of obesity. This is the beginning of less community contribution, less community engagement, more of a voyeuristic society where you're not engaging in physical activity, you're not engaging in games with other people, you're passively being entertained. So one way to think of it is that was the technology is getting exponentially more powerful, and it's having those effects, but on an exponentially larger scale very quickly. So the internet is one example. Now, but at least there was a barrier. There were boundaries. I could only get to the internet on a computer. With the smartphone, you see those boundaries go away, and that allows us to be pulled and prodded at every single moment, as you said. So yes, I think all these technologies can be the most amazing thing. I would probably say TikTok is cocaine. Don't try it. But maybe that's wrong. Actually, maybe if you're an artist or there could be benefits, but we're not being very intentional about how we're using it. And technology can be good, provided you use it in the right way. So I heard Brett Weinstein once say that basically we're going into this era of rapid change, and we're like children in this arena, that everything's new, things are changing quicker than they ever have, and we're running around like children in a foundry, just touching everything, and buying this myth that we have to embrace things quicker than ever, rather than be discerning and wise about how we utilize these things. My smartphone, I have a smartphone, all right, and I love it. I listen to Audible books, when I bike home. It's a great tool, but I've also spent a lot of time trying to craft it so that it does not co-opt my time, my life over and over again. So I think that is one place where schools are not adapting well, and where society in general is not adapting well to meet the needs of the moment.
Mm. Yeah, man. I love what you say about like passive entertainment as well. And that's, I feel like at this moment, it's important to say to everybody who's listening to this on the podcast, wake up for a moment. Hello, you're here. Welcome. We're listening to Shane Trotter and, pay attention. Why are you here? What are we trying to learn here? What are you getting out of this? And how are you going to use Shane's wisdom here in your life? Let's not be passive about this. One of my favorite rants from Seneca was where he just goes off about these students who come to listen to the philosophers, and it's basically like an entertainment for them. They're there for the show. They just want to be there because they've got nothing better to do, And I often feel like I find myself even just listening to podcasts or YouTube just as entertainment, and I end up finishing the episode and think, oh yeah, I got a few good things from that. But how much of that time was I awake as opposed to just doing things in the background? I wanted to keep on asking you about the marketing, because I think on one sense it's true that marketing is taking over in such a huge way, but on another sense, it's easy to set it up as the boogeyman. Like I had a conversation yesterday with a very successful business person here on the Sunshine Coast, and talking to him about his life, and he was giving me some wisdom for the direction that I'm going as well. And he made this point that he went to this seminar once, and this guy was saying, okay, so what are you? Okay, well, I'm a dentist. No, you're a person who markets dentistry. Because if you don't have any clients, then you're not really a dentist. So you've got to get, and what are you? Well, I'm a doctor. No, you're a person who markets. And there's something sinister about that, at least on first glance. But at the same time, I think the point is, well, if you think you've got something to offer, and if you think that you genuinely have something beautiful and helpful and useful to offer, then learn how to market, and don't let the whole industry be taken over by people who you don't think deserve to have that stuff. But if you've got something great, you push it out there. And is the problem not also that we need to learn in this age how to market better ideas over worse ideas? I mean, to me, it seems like what Jordan Peterson did was he came out with some really good ideas that people really thought were useful and valuable. And here's a guy who's taking it very seriously, and he pushed it out there, and it seemed to it seemed to part the waters, you might say. But so do you think that part of the problem is that perhaps people who are sharing messages that are fundamentally important to our current age are not getting in the water with those sharks and learning how to swim, in terms of marketing that message correctly to the world and showing them that there's real value in these sorts of ideas? I don't know. It's kind of a shot in the dark there for you.
No, I think it's a really good question. I would draw, and I think you do need to make a distinction. I mean, I'm a practical person. At the end of the day, we live in a world where you have to make sales or you're not going to be in business. So it doesn't matter how good your intentions are. If you can't stand up and, if I couldn't have gotten my book in people's hands and I didn't read marketing books on how to do that, then my book would have been less successful. And I believed in the ideas. So I don't think I don't think you want to paint a broad brush, too broad of a brush, and just like all marketers are evil. But I do think you also have to be very clear about the technologies and their interaction with the broader marketing mechanism. We have a lot of hypernormal stimuli that are attacking humans on a subconscious level. So not only are we having to, so Jordan Peterson, it's all well and good what he's doing. It's fantastic, but it'll never stand up to all of TikTok and to the impulse candy that is just infinite, that is there. And so unfortunately, I think it's kind of two-pronged. Hypernormal stimuli, meaning stimuli that were impossible throughout most of human history. So temptation that was impossible throughout most of human history. I'm into health. But I don't think you have to. I think you can enjoy a crumble cookie. I think they're fantastic, but there's not a lot of cultural pressure to develop the skill of making sure that the crumble cookie or the sugar addiction doesn't run your life. So I think it's kind of on two levels right now, that we have all these temptations that would have once been impossible, a level of temptation pulling us to give into our lowest impulses at all times. And also the one thing that is there to move you, to give you the capacity to overcome that culture, social pressure, is basically through marketing. It's become so normalized that we're being hit on both ends. Not only are my impulses being attacked, but my inclination to do what is normal, to follow the culture is being attacked. So that to me is the big issue, because culture has to be what fights impulse. There's the Spartans they had a culture that taught you to overcome impulse, and I think by and large we have a culture that says you deserve a culture. I think we have by and large a culture that is dictated by the larger marketing firms, and so that's really where my critique is. If you don't mind, I'd actually like to read a quote that I think will illustrate this. This is from the spring 1955 issue of the Journal of Retailing and it's a quote from Victor Lebeau. So he's a marketing consultant writing in the Journal of Retailing in 1955, and he says, "Our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfactions, our ego satisfactions in consumption. The measure of social status, social acceptance, of prestige is now to be found in our consumptive patterns, the very meaning and significance of our lives today expressed in consumptive terms. The greater the pressures upon the individual to conform to safe and accepted social standards, the more does he tend to express his aspirations and individuality in terms of what he wears, drives, eats, his home, his car, his pattern of food serving. We need to have people eat, drink, dress, ride, live with ever more complicated and therefore constantly more expensive consumption." So all that's just to say, it's not neutral. This is attacking our very souls, and it's the broader mechanism. It's not something that one individual can overcome, I don't think.
Man, that is I love stuff like that, because it's horrifying and it wakes you up, and it seems like, going back to this idea of religions and philosophies saying be cautious of new technologies. If you're grounded, and I mean truly grounded, in a philosophical tradition or a religious tradition, you'll see the direction that the culture's going, and you'll say, okay, I'm not so sure that this is good. I'm going to kind of check out in some places and check in some other places. But a lot of what we see, and I think it's demonstrated in that passage there, is, well, this is what the people want. We're going to give it to them because what the people want is number one. or how can we just keep this fire burning in whatever way is necessary? I even think about, you mentioned TikTok as well. I think about this TikTok star. I don't know anything about them other than that they're extremely successful, and what they do is they get bread and they smush it on their face, and that's it. that's what they do. Now, I look at that and I think, okay, A, that's art, and B, that is prophecy, because what it's doing is it's showing you, here is the desire of the people. This is entertainment. This is what you want. Smushing bread against your face. And it's like, okay, that's a prophecy. Watch out. Watch out, please. And I wonder, like, Brandon, I want you to jump in at any point here as well that you want. But you mentioned on the show the other day that we're kind of, living in one of the more peaceful times of history, the most peaceful time in history. And even despite the current war that we see happening in the Ukraine, you could probably still make a case that we are living in the most peaceful time in history. But nonetheless, with this new war on our doorsteps, it's like, we have to start thinking, and I want to ask you this, Shane, is this the giant shudder, within the global culture that is waking us up to the fact that like we've gone really far. We've got so much technology now. We can no longer afford to lack moral wisdom. Do you think that this is going to do anything to people? Do you think people are going to wake up from watching this, or are we still just looking at it as if it's a thing happening on our screens and that there's no reason to really change our lives?
That's a great question, and I hope it's the former. There's something I think a little bit more terrifying about a nuclear power, and it's a good reminder of just the responsibility that comes with being a human in 21st century world, in a post-nuclear world. What we should expect of everything from the average citizen to the politicians. But to be honest, I really don't know. Humanity is at least in my experiences, shows a startling ability to kind of normalize whatever their reality is and go back to life as life as normal. So I don't know. One thing I'll say is I don't know if you're familiar with William James's Moral Equivalent of War paper. He basically argued. Yeah, it's interesting, and I see a lot of wisdom in it. He was a pacifist, and this is the early 1900s, and he's looking at the world, looking at the increase in technology. This is before World War I, but we know what was about to come. And he was basically saying, I'm a pacifist. I believe that we need to work hard not to have these wars because they're going to be deadlier than anyone can imagine. And yet, we need something to take the place of war, because war has been one of the chief sources of virtue in society. And I think about that often. I think about, if you want to look at other things that help cause human devolution, my book is largely critical of parenting culture and parenting norms. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that parents don't feel like they need to make admirable children who are capable and contribution oriented and will be capable of meeting these great challenges that inevitably await them. Parents think I need to provide and protect, and they take that too far sometimes. They overprovide, they overprotect. And when there is a real understanding, when there's a military draft, when there's something to that effect, when we have World War I, we have Korea, we have the Great Depression, we have World War II, Korea, Vietnam. When you have that history, there's an expectation that, hey, it's not going to be nice to this guy, to this 13-year-old, to let him remain a forever child. I got to get him ready for something when he's 18, him or her. There's a level of competency, of virtue, whatever it is, that he's going to be expected to embody. And when those go away, you don't have anything pulling society's attention to get people ready. The problem is, without those virtues, I don't think you're ready to be happy either. At least not in a long-term sense, eudaimonia or a human flourishing sense. So those same skills still matter just for human happiness, human connection, social capital. But we don't have any incentives to make sure we're cultivating them.
Yeah, if I can hop in here too, because I have an analogy I think that a lot of people will understand. So I had a car accident when I was like 1 month into having my license, right? One of the most embarrassing things I think back on. But I remember talking to one of my friends in university, and he never had an accident. He was kind of like, oh, I'm a good driver. But he said actually something very interesting. He said, well, the reason why I don't have an accident is because every now and then I get close to having an accident, but I don't actually have the accident. But then for the next 3 months, 4 months, I'm like so focused because I know the potential is there for me to have an accident that I'm so focused on being a good driver. And it almost seems like, and I've been thinking about this like Shane as well. It almost seems like every now and then we need to get shook to snap some sense back into us, right? Now, that doesn't mean we need a war every 20 years or 50 years to do that. You can do that in other ways. Like if I read history and I'm really reading and I'm really paying attention, I can get really into it and I can get almost scared the fact that can even happen. So it's almost like if you like, there's ways of artificially doing that, of artificially scaring yourself that doesn't result in mass death. Okay, there's ways to do that. There's ways to engineer around that. History is a great one, and I know Shane, you're a big proponent of history. I know from my own experience, growing up, I've never taken a history course. I've learned a lot through history, but I'm university educated, never took a history course. Everything has been private study, and I think I don't feel like there's a big focus on history in our education system. I don't know, Shane, what do you think about that? You're a bit more involved in the education.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. We have requirements, state mandated requirements as to what we have to teach, but there's not a lot of recognition as to why it's important in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of a compilation of isolated facts that we're supposed to remember, and teachers and students alike, many of them, they really don't understand why you would learn it other than just because you're a nerd who likes this stuff. They kind of see it from a Wikipedia point of view rather than the lessons of history. So I would absolutely agree with you on that.
Could you maybe speak a little bit more to some of the trends that you see in youth who you teach? I mean, I've spoken to a lot of educators, and it's not good. A lot of people are very worried about, on the one hand, I've heard that young boys are just doing terribly in education in so many metrics. I've also heard that it's obviously extremely difficult growing up as a young girl in today's culture, with just the deluge of sexual material out there that is always around. And so I don't know what are some of the trends that you see, and perhaps maybe leading into the latter half of this interview where I do want to focus on the hopeful stuff. Is there anything that you see in the youth that you think is hopeful, that can give us hope that they are going to be able to face these challenges that they'll have?
Do you want me to start with the trends, I guess, and then move to hope?
Yeah.
It would be hard to fully encapsulate what we're seeing with youth. Skyrocketing rates of depression, anxiety, suicide rates are much higher in teens. So there's that. That you can talk to parents though, and they'll tell you often, how much more often anyway, kind of the archetypical teen today is spending the majority of their time in their room alone looking at a phone. They're isolating themselves in a room. I forget the exact statistic, but over a 5-year period, basically, seniors began going out less often than 8th graders did 5 years previous. So there's this kind of lack of desire to actually engage and be part of the world. So it's just kind of I see it as becoming less human, less engaged, less activated, less excited about becoming an adult, about becoming much of anything, and more willing to scroll their life away and to just mindlessly be entertained. So that's what I see in the aggregate. Now there are, I have to say, I some of the best kids I've ever taught, I'm teaching this year. I've seen phenomenal students who I think are, maybe they have a healthy skepticism. But one thing I'm seeing in our generation and perhaps in the younger generations is kind of where some people are starting to rediscover why things matter that we forgot mattered. Rediscover why philosophy mattered. Rediscover, why religion matters. You see. I was watching a monk debate between Tony Blair and Christopher Hitchens on is religion a force for good in the world? And it was really interesting to me because Christopher Hitchens is just brilliant, and so Tony Blair, who's making the argument for religion, he made good arguments in the opening, and then he's on the defense the entire time, and he seems to not even have the words to explain that, like, no, religion is it's a social technology that we have to utilize, or else people are going to feel this gap of meaning in their life. The social, the community aspect of it never came into mind for him. It was all on this hyper individualist perspective. So I think we're starting to rediscover. Are you familiar with Chesterton's fence?
I have heard, yeah, but yeah, revise the idea. Yeah.
So basically, it's I can't remember exactly what it is, but there's a fence out in the middle of nowhere, and someone says we should tear it down. It's not serving any purpose, and the response is, well, we need to figure out what purpose it initially served before we tear it down. Because if we can't figure that out, then there's going to be unintended consequences likely. So, for example, almost nothing exists without it serving a purpose. And you can't just throw it to the wayside, because there's going to be some purpose that you find out on the back end is missing now. So I think religion is a very good example of that. So yeah, where I see positives is in our generation and the younger generation, kind of a return to some of these things. Stoicism's making a comeback. There's a great article I read recently on the rise of the new Stoics, which I thought was a kind of exciting idea that, okay, we have a new generation of people thinking differently. So I think there's certainly, if you look at history, there's always tended to be a backlash. After there was a similar devolution in the late 1800s, and muscular Christianity, Theodore Roosevelt, the strenuous life, a playground movement, all of these things came about in response in the early 1900s. Factory workers doing this mindless, dehumanizing work organized and started playing football. That's where the NFL comes from. So there's always been this backlash, and I'm hopeful that we're starting to see it.
I love what you say about just the absolute importance of community and getting us together in this place. Because I mean, I grew up in a religion, and maybe I'd like to talk to you about your experience as well. I grew up in a religion and then left it, and I have been thinking lately that it's like that there's no substitute for getting together just once a week with people who are, even if you disagree with them, at least we can all agree that we're here to maybe improve our lives and the lives of this little community that we're a part of. And one thing that I've done to try and get through my pride of actually returning to some sort of religious congregation, even though I haven't done that yet. So I haven't succeeded yet, but I thought, it's actually okay to be in a group of people with whom you have a theological or philosophical dispute. That's okay. Even if you don't agree with the entirety of that religion or what it's teaching, perhaps what you can agree on is that you're all there to grow and learn and become better. And perhaps you can sift the wheat from the chaff when it comes to the people who are there to virtue signal the Sunday Christians, you might say, or the Sunday whatever religion. And you can move past that, and you can find the people who are there who are genuinely there to be spiritually uplifted, to be to become a different person. And it seems like it's just so horrifying to think about how you say, that so many of the kids these days, I sound like a 90-year-old, so many of the kids these days, they're spending so much time isolated. So could you maybe would you consider talking about your own return to some sort of community, religious community? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I,
Why did you do it? Oh, but go on. Yeah, I'll let you. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And there's so much here, so I'll try
Yeah,
to
man.
make it concise. Um, the I think I left religion for probably, it sounds like, many of the same reasons that you did. I had many of the same trepidations. I had trouble with with biblical literalism, which was kind of what I felt was pushed often. I had trouble with the idea that faith, or like professing a blind faith to things, was important. Was more important than than religious practice. And I also had issues with what you're referring to. I think of like the virtue signaling Christians. I think of that as what has been termed moralistic therapeutic deism, which in the early 2000s, there were a couple of sociologists, I don't remember their names, at UNC, who did a national survey of the US, and where they surveyed people, younger generations, older generations, and they basically came to the conclusion that in people 30, I think it was 30 and below, more the predominant religion was not Christianity, or any other known religion. It was something they called moralistic therapeutic deism, which is basically there is a God, kind of you can go to them whenever you need something. So it's just a very immature view of religion. They're there to take care of you, make sure all your problems are taken care of, make sure you don't have to die, because that's scary and you don't want to think about death. But they don't really require anything of you, and everyone can do whatever they want. It's no big deal. That was moralistic therapeutic deism, and it's something I've talked to my pastor about since returning to church. And it's one reason I love him so much is, that study was really profound for him too, in figuring out how to help people approach what he considers a real Christianity. Eventually, after over a decade away from church, where I felt like I couldn't go to church because I didn't believe what I was supposed to believe, I started to recognize that I thought religion was really important. So in the last year, I did a lot of study. I read a lot of books on Judaism, actually, because I had read that Judaism is about religious practice. They're not as much into belief. They understand the importance of practice, not only for individual development, but also for the social capital aspect, the community aspect. And eventually, I realized, though, that living in Texas, where there's not a large Jewish population near me, I was not going to benefit from the community aspect. Part of it is being in your community and practicing the religion of the people around you. And so I decided, okay, if I'm going to go back to religion, it needs to be Christianity. And a lot of my study kind of helped me. I loved Maimonides, his concept of God as basically which you cannot understand in any way, shape, or form. So he was a Jewish leader, but so a lot of those things kind of up my comfort level, and I just made peace, like you said, with the fact that, hey, there might be people who have different interpretations of what's going on. I think that religious practice is important, that there are some truths and wisdom about the world that you can only get through practice, that the faith element is actually putting your faith into the practice, and that it's going to have benefit. And as far as whether I believe in the divinity of Christ or anything like that, that to me, I find that to be irrelevant, at least in my own mind. So it's been really good. The biggest reason probably that pulled me back is to look at the state of the world and to realize the power of religion to move communities to good things. And with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old now, I wanted to put them where else do people congregate every week to talk about how to live well? Congregate in person every week to talk about how to live well. I thought that was important. And I also think for young people, I think I'm a truth seeker. I think that's important when you get older. But for in your youth, you need to have your moral intuitions trained. So I thought that was important too for my children.
Well, maybe we can move on to the moral training as well. I really appreciate you sharing your experience there, because I think it takes a lot of courage to actually step back into a church when you've left it. I would say especially if where you're stepping back into is a place that is the very place that you left when you were younger. Because it's kind of like, oh, look who's crawling back, that sort of thing, and nobody wants to feel that, right? But I just really appreciate the approach that you're taking, and said, look, there's really important stuff here, and perhaps I don't understand everything. That's okay. And I heard a really good argument once. It was basically like, we need to have one day a week where things are different, where we set it apart from the rest of the week, where it's not just going to be the same. Get up in the morning, you do your little routine, you get on your phone, you go to work, it's like a reset for the week. Okay, reset, pay attention, focus. What is your life about? What are you moving towards? And so you talk about this moral training, and this, I think, is where Stoicism in all its forms has actually done really well. And it's funny that we're talking about these times where we're like being pulled towards devolution. And something that I've often said, Shane, is I wonder how much of the resurgence of Stoicism today is like a subconscious reaction to the global state of this constant search for pleasure. Like when we're in such a kind of hedonistic state as a global culture, is there an underlying thing that pulls people towards that more ascetic tradition of, okay, well, that's not the thing that's going to make me happy. I need to push back against this within myself. And it seems to me that that's moral training, and that's where Stoicism has gone really right in our modern age, is just to pull people back and say, okay, hang on. I don't know if the direction you're going is going to make you truly happy. There's more important things, and you should think about that at least. If anything, Stoicism has done, it's got people to think about these things. So when you talk about moral training, do you see this as something that is a necessary antidote to the current state of the world?
Yes, without a doubt.
And if so, how?
Yeah, without a doubt. You just can't live. I think, and I completely agree with your view as to why Stoicism made this comeback. People are yearning for real meaning, for real purpose, and so it's stoked kind of a movement towards exploring what does the ancient wisdom teach us, and Stoicism has kind of come out as one of the most practical and effective means for developing the capacity to live well, I think. So yeah, like you said, training. That's what I think of virtues as excellences that have to be trained, and so that's what Stoicism does a phenomenal job of, as do most moral traditions. So I would completely agree with all of that. One of the things I've often thought about with Stoicism, and I think where it's lacking, and why another reason why I return to church, is that it tends to be completely individualistic. There are no Stoic churches that I know of. There are phenomenal outlets like this, where people who are, I'm probably, if you just look at my thought processes and inspirations, I'm technically more Stoic than Christian for sure. But and there are great outlets like this where I get to connect with phenomenal people. But on a consistent basis, there's no Stoic center in my community. that is helping lead the charge against the giving kids smartphones at age 10. And so I see that churches have the capacity to do this. And that's actually been a primary function of religion. And so that's one place I find Stoicism lacking. And so I see this movement of people towards Stoicism, and I think it's wonderful, but yet to thrive, we need to be connected. And I wonder if you have the same experience I have, same to Brandon. Do you often find yourself struggling to, I find lots of amazing people I love to keep in contact with through podcast, email, etc. And yet I feel really misunderstood by people in my own community. I have lots of friends, I get along with people, but I feel like on a really deep level, they don't get me. So there's a lacking connection.
Well, I think, firstly, I think that you're exactly right that there is a problem in our, Ashley says we are in the Stoic Church now. I'm taking notes for the cult of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society here. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to push back against that and say, okay, like, no, there is a spiritual aspect to Stoicism, and there is a community aspect to Stoicism. And to your point, I was speaking to somebody the other day who, a very, very deep thinker, who I haven't even begun to strip the onion layers away from who he is and what he has to teach me. But he spent a lot of time researching like a lot of the major world religions and pulling together some of the fundamental core aspects of them and saying, what are they all aiming towards? And it's freaky what he has there, a lot of like hermetics and stuff like that. But nonetheless, he made a point that was so important. He said, look, Stoicism, it's too individualistic, and like you just said, and we need to figure out a way to get people into the community aspect, to care and truly love humanity and love people enough to get outside of yourself. And my response to him was like, hang on, no, that's not what Stoicism is all about. It's about this, and it's about this, and it's about this, and it's about sharing and loving and community and all this sort of stuff. And he said, no, I'm not talking about the core principles of Stoicism. I'm talking about Stoicism as is. You look in the world at the moment, this current state of Stoicism, that's just what it is, right? It's our job to go back and take a look at these principles and say, okay, well, what are we missing? And we need to bring that back in. But I think that I've been fortunate, Shane, because I've done the philosophical mentoring and I've, tried to bring people into the community and do the podcast. I have enough of those conversations with people where I feel afterwards like, oh my gosh, it's so good to talk to somebody for an hour about how we can both grow and share together. And that's so meaningful. And I think that the Walled Garden is the next step to that. But I want to say one thing on that, which is that eventually we are going to have a physical in-person component to the Walled Garden. It has to happen, because I'm already seeing with myself that so much of my life is online, and I hate that. And so I this is why I'm talking to people the business guys saying, hey, okay, you got to market in certain ways because I want to get into speaking, so I can be there in person with people. I want to, create events live in person and, workshops live in person so that we can actually have both of those worlds and bring them together. There we go. As above, so below. There's a deep religious idea for us all. But I don't know, Brandon, what's your experience been?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a feature and it's a bug. Stoicism is cut down, stripped so bare so that it's basically just a structure for everything. You could make the argument that Christianity is a manifestation of Stoicism. It's a structure, and then they added on a church, and then they added on a community, and they added on music. The reason why it's difficult to add those things and still call it Stoicism is because in Stoicism, everything external is indifferent. It doesn't have good value. It doesn't have bad value. Now, so you could say Christianity, they add music in there and they sing together. But an important aspect of those particular songs, of that music, is understanding the lesson behind it. What is this trying to actually teach us? And so it's a feature and it's a bug. What makes it beautiful is that you can add your personality to Stoicism if you understand the fundamentals. And, Simon, we spoke about this quite a bit, how you can be a musician and be a stoic. You can be a painter and be a stoic. You can be, I spoke to a guy last week who is CEI, chief, internet. He's like the head guy of the networking in his company, and he's a stoic. And so it's compatible with so many walks of life, but that's the feature. The bug part is that you have to fill in the blanks yourself. You have to sort of write your own book, and that can be a lonely process. And just one more thing I'll say is that the other flip side of that is that Stoicism sort of focuses more on connecting with everyone, and it's a very difficult thing to do, especially with people that maybe you tend to clash with. And of course, there's that Marcus Aurelius quote that everyone overquotes too much, but I have to do it, about the rows of teeth fitting together, and how he's meditating on going out and meeting with people who are going to be rude and ungrateful, but they share in the divinity, and so they are a part of the whole. And so it's a way of sort of Stoicism fundamentally wants you to meet every single person, even if you disagree with them, even if you're enemies, and find some connection with them. And that's very difficult. It's very difficult. But I definitely share your things, and maybe it's easier for me because I'm introverted, but I definitely share the concern.
Well, can I add one thing there? And that what I might do is, firstly, Shane, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much. I want to transition over to having whether Scott or David or Ashley, if they have any questions, guys, if you have any questions, just raise your hand in the Zoom chat, and I want to bring you in. But one thing that I would say about that, it's like that oikeiosis, like the expansion of you start to fill bigger and bigger spaces within the cosmos, realizing that you're a part of those spaces. I think that there is the physical aspect to that, in that you see a human, you want to build a connection, and that's great. But I think that the thing that really gets you to see why you should do that, I think that's, and this is an intuition myself walking this path, is it's the spiritual transformation of yet dissolving into, okay, I'm within this web of humanity. Okay, I've just dissolved into that part, and I've seen, okay, there is no necessary separation. I'm a part of this hive, and then you dissolve into the larger part. Okay, well, I'm part of the cosmos, but it sounds so egotistical, but you are the cosmos. You're the same stuff. There is no inner and outer. It's this. You're in this thing. You inhabit that space, and when you inhabit that space, see, these are the things that I have no idea how to articulate these ideas, but it's part of that spiritual path that, it's hard to articulate these ideas. But once you arrive there, it makes so much sense that you would want to be participating in community and participating with your human beings and loving and caring for other human beings. And so, I don't know, like, that seems to me that there's two aspects for that idea. I don't know, Shane, if you had any comments there.
To be honest, you guys are giving it's just great stuff. I'm really thinking through it myself.
Listen, I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'm just trying to articulate ideas here. So
no, it's the inevitable. It's the this is religion, stoicism, whatever it is. It's that training program that puts you through experiences that can show you what words can't say. Is how I often think about it. So yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. That it's one of the things I actually. I'm reading a book right now called A Case for God, and the woman makes the case basically that there's not been this literal interpretation throughout most of any religion. There's an understanding that it's through this practice that you get insights into things that you cannot explain, that you have to experience. And you can call those things God or whatever. We can't explain them. It's one thing my pastor said that I actually liked. He was explaining to me that the Trinity makes no sense. It's really, 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 really hard to, if you sit down and think about the Trinity, it's really hard to make sense of. And that's that's how it's supposed to be. Keep practicing. 20 years, you might get it. And so I tend to presume that way of thinking is right. That to look at it a different way, you look at where is the most growth in yourself. It's usually through some sort of experience where you found yourself. It's a transcendent experience where all of a sudden you're moved beyond words, and it's like, what just happened to me? Whether it's sport or waking up next to a stream, nature, that sensation of awe, but it's through actual experience. Music, to go. That's what you were talking about, Brandon. The religious nature, the religious experiences that people have with music are really profound. So that would be something. I do understand what you're saying, Brandon, but the Stoics got to get on board with. They got to have their own. What the problem with Stoicism, as I see it, and again, I am probably a Stoic in some way, shape, or form. You could define me as a Stoic, but it's what are the Stoic holidays? What are the Stoic rites of passages? What are the Stoics? What connects me to this tradition of Stoicism? So I know that I'm doing the same ritual that someone did 200 years before. Those are really profound things.
Yeah, I mean, even just when you talk about this interpretation of the Bible as a literal kind of material interpretation, like these things happened. Whenever somebody asks me, well, do you think the Bible is true? Or do you think that God is true? My first question to them is, what do you mean by true? What do you mean by God? From which standpoint are you interpreting the Bible? Because there's a rich history of interpretation of the Bible. It's a whole study. How do we face this book? How do we get the truth from it, if there is such a thing? And people usually think that that's a cop-out, like, well, you're just avoiding. No, I genuinely mean it. Like, what do you mean by true? Because it's so difficult to discern these things. But Shane, before I bring in Ashley for a question, I want to round this interview off and say, firstly, thank you so much for being here. This has been such an honor. And Brandon, brilliant recommendation, mate. And keep them coming. But I don't know, Shane, is there anything that you wanted to share with our audience on the podcast end of things? And for those who are listening, they can listen to the entire Q&A section as well afterwards on thewalledgarden.com. But apart from, your book, which is out right now, is there anything else that you want to share with everybody?
Nothing comes to mind. Yeah, the book is out, and I'm always anxious to connect with like-minded people and to hear insights as to how actual change and actual help can be made. So the best way to contact me is at my website, trottershane.com. There's an email link through there. That's the best way to get in contact.
You've been listening to the Walled Garden Podcast. If you'd like to attend any of our free meetups and events, or if you'd like to get one-on-one mentoring with either Sharon LaBelle, Kai Whiting, or myself, just go to thewalledgarden.com. But for now, don't forget to nourish those gardens in your mind.